With me is Paul Erasmus, a man who has made international headlines the past 2 weeks since Winnie Madikizela-mandela passed away on the 2nd of April. He is a former Stratcom security employee and the man who claims that Winnie is innocent, that she never had anything to do with Stompie Sepe's death and numerous other vile things attributed to the mother of the nation. Paul, thank you very much for talking to Herald today. First of all, who is Paul Erasmus? Where do you come from? What's your background?
I'm just a run-of-the-mill little normal South African that was conscripted into the military/police when I matriculated in 1974. I was very much in, my posting was the Kanon donkeys in Potchefstroom, and I was heartbroken. My mother burst out crying and I was very much in love with a girl, and the police force seemed a better alternative because at least it was a lot shorter. Instead of 18 months, I only had to go away for 5 months and I could see my girlfriend every weekend, and that was the start of a disastrous life. I was in the security branch in 1976 when the students rose up, and it affected me terribly. I don't think I'd ever seen violence, and certainly not dead people on a scale like that. And I then made a decision with a lot of very into the church at that time, and the big thing was of course the Cold War, and there was a group in South Africa called Christian Missions to the Communist World by a guy that had apparently been locked up in the gulags in Russia for or spent his life there. And I heard him speak the one night, and I needed to be a part of this fight to stop this happening in my country. So I applied to join the security branch, and in January 1977 I started on the so-called White Affairs staff of the security branch, John Foster Square. It wasn't a week before I was already involved in nocturnal activities like spraying slogans, throwing bricks through windows, terrorizing very much the white left in this country. The powers that be felt that we could handle the internal security situation in South Africa because the blacks were too stupid to organize or too ineffective to organize their own liberation. It was the white communists, the white left, the Joe Slovers of the world, and the Helen Josephs and Sheila Weinberg and people like that. And that's what all this was about, was to literally terrorize these people into getting out of South Africa the so-called lager mentality. And a couple of years later, in 1983-84, the cabinet started to become alarmed at these type of activities because this was happening on a national basis. And they then took what were ad hoc propaganda type actions and formalized them. At this meeting there was, I managed to get a copy of it, all the people that we knew and loved those years, of course, Pieter Willem Botha and the other crowd of gangsters like Pik Botha, Vlok wasn't there, all the ministers, and of course the State Security Council. And what they did then was they decided that 4 government departments would be responsible for carrying out this secret war, this propaganda, basically propaganda war. That would have been us, the security branch, our counterparts in the Bureau of State Security, Foreign Affairs, take note, and military intelligence. And each group was given defined targets and operations which were named and became part of the structure. So in my case, I worked not then immediately. I used to do a lot of artwork for them. It was me that did notable South African bits that nobody knew where they originated from, that went up overnight right across the country. I mean, hello, who had the capability to do this? Like Bishop Tutu, for God's sake, you're killing our children. And then I did this very dramatic one, Is Your School Burning, with this scepter of death hovering over a black school, and the type of stuff that would
And were
affect.
these slogans now sprayed on walls? Or
No, these were posters.
yes.
I actually outsold Stratcom at one time because they'd run, the government printing service in Pretoria would run like a 500,000 of these things at a time, and that made me really feel good. I didn't get any money for it, but my mother always wanted me to be an artist, so it was fantastic. And a hell of a lot of fun as well.
But how did you manage to distribute these things without it being traced back to you?
This was via Stratcom,
Yeah.
formal Stratcom. They would send these things out to every corner of this country, had Stratcom representatives, and on a certain night everybody would go down to, or would have gone down to the hardware store, but have your bucket of poster glue and your brushes, and at 2 o'clock in the morning these posters went up. The country would wake up the next day and see millions of the stuff, and so the messages were conveyed. Now that was a very small and funny part of it, but the real thing was that radio shows were loaded, the SABC was full of people that worked for us.
You say that lots of journalists were on the payroll, or in any case in the pocket of Stratcom and the security
Intelligence
forces.
gathering.
Yes.
Nothing better, no more valuable person than somebody who works for a newspaper, simply because of the accessibility of information.
But these people, did they actually know that they were these journalists, that they were compromised? I mean, were they compromised,
Oh, yeah.
or did they actually think they were just sort of sharing information with the public?
No, these were registered agents. I handled a lot of these people as well, and I can just tell you things. I'm not going to mention the years. It's not my brief to make people's lives uncomfortable. But the head of programming at the SABC was one of them. So we got out there what we wanted to get out of them.
There's a huge call now coming through that these journalists must be named and shamed, because apparently some of them are still working as journalists.
Well, that's going to be up to somebody else to do. You know, there were various programs within the police as well. There was a thing called the RS program, where especially if you had a senior officer for a dad, your son would then be sent to university. The government would pay, he'd secretly be a policeman. He was then a spy at university, and when he came out as an RS, they had code numbers, he would then go and get a job at the Star, for example. And he would get his normal promotions. A lot of them, obviously with a degree, became more educated than our ex-minister, commissioners of police. Most of them, we were lucky if they even had a standard 6, I think. But anyway, that's just a bit of my acerbic wit.
Okay, Paul, so you were now involved in this propaganda campaign and spreading the news, because you felt that you were fighting the big red danger, die rooi gevaar. So when did your sort of insights change? When did you have this Damascus moment where you felt that what's going on is not right?
I'm quite honoured that I've had this Damascus moment. Anyway, the stress for me is for a lot of times, I was certainly carrying the biggest workload of the biggest Stratcom unit in the country, and that was John Foster Square, Johannesburg.
Mm-hmm.
My commanding officer didn't even know who Mr. John Major was, for example, so you can imagine the pressure on me, and especially at the time running an operation that was so good, an absolute jewel of intelligence gathering. I don't know that anybody has done something like this before. Sit on one side of the world and influence possibly the most important person that had any say, Britain being our biggest trading partner, in South Africa's future, and of critical importance was their association, his association with Nelson and Winnie Mandela. So to have this channel, which I got commended for, was absolutely unbelievable. I could take material from any source, and it wasn't only Winnie Mandela, and the British government would be informed about it. I was in contact eventually with many members of parliament, and I must just tell you this operation was mirrored on the other side of the Atlantic, and we had even an entree into the White House. Back home, we worked under a section known as C1 and at other times D1. This was covert intelligence, stroke Stratcom. the other leg of our operation was vlakplaas. And it worked like this: if there was something physical that had to be done, Eugene Lecoq and the vlakplaas guys would come in. And one of the things that I was involved in there was the establishment, or the nationalist government establishment, was taking a lot of heat on 702 from John Robbie. And the plot went down like this. This is what was planned, and I actually went to meet Eugene about this, was that we would challenge him on the air. We would get a flunky to challenge him to go with the one night to Soweto, but he wouldn't know it was Kufut guys and the cock and them. And he would now go on the police patrols to just sort of shut him up now, and show him what life was really like. And during this, there'd be the staged firefight where he would be shot, not dead. And the story went around was that he'd be shot in the leg, and then the cops would save his life. And if this didn't change his damn attitude to the South African police, and the very vitriolic attacks that he launched on us every day, then nothing would. Well, this was, lunatic plots volume.
But nothing came of that.
No, it didn't. John Robbie hasn't left me alone to this day. My brother phones me regularly because he listens to 702.
So what changed? When did you decide, okay, this is not for me anymore?
You know what? I started to suffer from stress in the 1980s. My son is sitting over there, had health problems. I was studying. I was running these operations. I had the most bizarre lifestyle. I was running agents from my house in Alberton. It was just too much. And I went on study leave, and my boss was phoning me every day. They would send a car to my house with heaps of intercepted post. And I was this like guru, doing something, mark it. And I would go through the stuff, endless. And I saw myself, as, pardon the word, as a professional shit stirrer. I invited the one time, it was so funny, I got this thing that Joe Slover would be in town, and I think Andries Trenig, for God's sake, and that. Anyway, I organised a meal, invited all of them without the one knowing the other one. They all got there together, and there was almost a bloodbath. Joe Slover looked at these people and he said, "What the hell?" And this type of stuff, I mean, I went to head office, and I was fated like this hero.
But there wasn't rail with that. Why would you organise a meeting like that?
It was just to sow chaos.
Okay.
But all the time these little things were going in, and the big thing was to break the Mandelas. And how did you get to the old man with his, to Madiba with his more impeccable integrity? I mean, what did he do apart from sit in a cell, as terrible as what it is, compared to what Winnie was involved in? So everything that Winnie did, said, uttered, and she was absolutely our biggest ally. She would put on that green uniform, boy, and it was this type of stuff went down worldwide. We're dealing with another Che Guevara at least, or Fidel Castro.
And she obviously helped you with the slogans and the thing,
The
bring us the
tires.
matches and the tires, that played into your hands.
Correct. She was an absolute propagandist dream. I mean, can you think of any better situation than this? And then, I suppose she was running wild, because there was, you see, having this type of intelligence. Mandela went to it. He did, as far as I can remember. In fact, I might have even read the transcript. And he said to her, "We have to stop that. It's doing the ANC a lot of damage." And she refused.
So did his lawyer, Mandela's lawyer as well. Asked her, please, tone down.
Yeah, you see. So I suppose the breakup of the marriage was inevitable. I did get a transfer eventually to this quiet little sleepy hollow known as Mossel Bay, and immediately walked into a hornet's nest. My commander wanted me to get rid of his political enemies. One of them was a well-known helicopter company, and I refused to do it. I just somewhere got to a point in my life I couldn't do this filth anymore. In Joburg, we were given orders, my partner, Nani Bayers, who my son knows very well, and the reason that Dylan can hear today is that Nani Bayers got him to a doctor because he was born deaf, and for that I idolized him. Nani and I were sent out on missions that you cannot believe, to kill people, stab people. I shot more cars to pieces than people can believe. I shot Mama Winnie's house to pieces, and there's a photograph of me trying to work out where my bullets were. I'm laughing about it. It's actually not funny. It's terrible. Eventually this came, I'll just jump ahead there for a moment, into my amnesty application, and I applied for amnesty for 526 first schedule offences relating to 80 major incidents, and was given amnesty on all of them, barring matters which the amnesty committee felt that they couldn't hear, and then a couple of them were where they found that I'd actually personally gained. I've always been an avid gardener, so I used to steal the hell out of people's gardens with pot plants and stuff like that. Jokes aside, the more serious ones were the postal interceptions and bugging. That was under the Old Post Office Act 7 of 1958, if my memory serves me correctly. And that's what happened in Mossel Bay, because they were using this monitoring system to bug people for private business reasons. Moscas's boardroom was bugged. Government equipment was being used, and I was in charge of all this technical stuff. And I just couldn't do this anymore. Anyway, my nerves were finished from Joburg and then from what happened here. I was then sort of seen as a threat, because I've never shut my mouth. I just never felt, why should I be scared when I know I'm right?
But no, you were the perpetrator. You were the one that was, you were watching Winnie. You were trying to make her out for anything that's vile in this country. And then you go and you turn around and you say, listen, this is what we did, and it was wrong, and she's actually innocent.
I worked at John Foster Square. That was where the Stratcom unit was. Soweto was a division on its own. They had guys monitoring her around the clock. Obviously. Her house was bugged. Her post was intercepted. Old news. She received huge attention. She was then regarded broadly as the most dangerous woman in the country. Winnie was the populist that could get the masses raised up. She was also the key, as they saw, to getting to Nelson. His soft underbelly, if there was one.
Yes, of course. Would
of course be Winnie. So whatever intelligence they gained in Soweto, they would send through, of course, everything copied with Teutonic thoroughness. The head office would get a copy and I would get a copy. Some of it, if it was like hot stuff off the press, I would actually go and meet the guy. I would then go and sit and apply this stuff. When he went to a party and had too much to drink, I would elevate this. When he went to a party and got so drunk she was staggering around, and then I linked Zinzi, the two of them were very close at that time. I linked the two of them together. I added in Dacha smoking. I don't know to this day, and I swear to God that I'm sitting here, that Winnie ever smoked grass. I think we might have had a more peaceful country if she had, but anyway. This is the type of stuff that went overseas.
So it's where there's smoke, there's fire. You took the smoke and you just turned it into fire.
Well, the perfect formula for Stratcom was actually goes back to, and we were lectured on this, to Joseph Goebbels in Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany. Was the perfect sort of the perfect thing for the human brain, for a reasonably intelligent person, is 70-30. 70% truth and 30% is where you add your rubbish in. But this varied. Sometimes it was the other way around.
30% truth and 70%.
Yeah, as long as you
propaganda.
could get this point out. And if you know, the other thing was, Ilse, the oldest adage of them all, if you tell the world enough bull dust, or bull, pardon my language.
Long enough.
You tell them, hammer this point home over and over, they'll believe it. And the story about Winnie and Stompie, I mean, most people, I got attacked here in George by this thing about, by saying Winnie killed Stompie. I said she didn't. I'm not Winnie's defender. There is not a shred. Look, maybe she did, who knows? I don't know. But I can tell you one thing is that if she ever did, Soweto Security Branch or the detectives that investigated that would have known about it, that she was involved. Because remember, Jerry Richardson, who was one of our agents, incidentally admitted it in court. Has the world forgotten this? He admitted it. And he actually alluded to the fact that Stompie was killed because Stompie knew that he was a security branch informer. They were scared of getting necklaced.
But you say that all of the members of the Mandela Football Club, the thugs that surrounded Winnie, that they were all on the payroll of
how difficult is it to recruit a 14-year-old uneducated child?
But they were idealists. They were idealists. They were fighting for freedom.
But he was doing it inadvertently. A black policeman goes up to him and says, listen, I'm working for MK's Ultra thing or whatever. We're worried about Jerry Richardson. I'm going to give you 200 Rand a day. I'll meet you every night and you tell me what's going on in Mama Winnie's house. We're protecting her. I mean, build us stories. God, I can sit and think of a million scenarios that could have happened.
Okay, George Fivers, the ex-police commissioner, also said in his second investigation that they did later on that they also could find no evidence that she was involved in those killings. You know, not just Zompies.
Well, look, I have no love or truck for police generals, but I can tell you that Uncle George, as I call him, sorry, that's Mr. George Bezos, Uncle George Fivers. I watched what he said, and I can confirm everything that he said. There's no evidence that when he was personally, physically involved in the murder of Stompie. I mean, for God's sake, Jerry Richardson admitted in court that he killed him and gave graphic evidence.
But he did say on Winnie's orders.
Well, I don't know that. I don't know that. Does anybody know that?
Well, you were in the best position because you had a house bagged.
It's possible. I certainly never received any information to that effect.
Tell me, why do you think, because you've been saying this all along, you know, it came out in the TRC hearings, you've been saying all along there's no proof regarding Winnie and a lot of other things. Why do you think now that she's died, that you are so much in the limelight, that everybody wants to speak to you regarding these things?
The world is now taking a notice of what actually happened. And you know, I think poor Winnie was just battered to the point eventually where there was nothing she could do about this. She was so discredited, it's unbelievable. And there's another aspect to this. Not withdrew, I just out of sympathy for her. I mean, she was getting heavily criticized for her association, and specifically the story that I had a physical relationship with her. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, those rumors still run around, George.
But started, oh yeah. Funny, eh? Wonderful church people. Not one of them ever came to me and said, you know what, brother, is this true? They just condemned me. Now, I don't care about that, and they can go and rot in merry hell, but it impacted on my son. People in this town. Anyway.
So what is your life and George like at the moment? What do you do?
Everything peaceful, Adel.
Are you a farmer?
We farm, we do beekeeping, we do art, my first love. We run a laser machine up until the lightning of a couple of weeks ago. We lost our laser machine. We do carpentry, woodwork, and a hell of a lot of fundraising, which I get a great kick out of. And I suppose one could say, you could ask me the question, what would Winnie say? I told her last year. She said, that's very nice.
When did you see her last year?
When was the Mashito conference? Around the middle of last year.
Was it a face-to-face meeting?
Yeah, yeah. We've actually got some pics of it, and they did film it, but she was quite fascinated. You know, her focus, never really me, it's been Dylan.
But I also
treated my
read
kids absolutely with deference. I never saw Winnie ever be anything other than kind to any children or somebody that was underprivileged. I mean, I could ask my son, you could ask him how many times we were at Latuli House waiting for Winnie for some other reason, And there were these people sitting outside there, and Winnie would not get in that 666 Mercedes Benz until she'd spoken to the last one. They all got to her, whether it was 6 o'clock at night, and she would dish out money. There was a roll of money. Winnie would say, okay, tomorrow you must go to the legal aid clinic. The one woman there, the one night, was battered by her husband. She was beaten to pieces, and I don't know what. Nobody could help her. The police weren't interested or whatever. When he listened to the whole story, wrote down, made notes, and the next day made phone calls.
I read somewhere that she also gave your daughter her wedding ring.
Correct.
Do you still have it?
Well, my daughter's got it.
And that is now her wedding ring, Nelson Mandela, and her wedding. So that is an historic, what is the word, artifact.
Well, this is it. You know, if people hate me for that reason, I want to see anything deeper in it. In fact, my lawyer was present that night, as were a couple of people. And my lawyer, Tony, who's quite a well-known guy, he produced a movie on Brett Keble. Tony and I have been friends for many, many years. He wanted to go with, and I had, Candice was with me that weekend, divorced, and of course Dylan's been in my custody. And we went off to Winnie's place, and very emotional. Hadn't had a good day or week, but she didn't talk about it. And they'd been braaiing there. We had something to eat and snacks and that, and we were sitting talking. And Winnie did this amazing thing. She was hugging Candice, and telling her about me, that I'm a brave man. And
Candice is your daughter?
Candice, my daughter. And the next thing, she took this ring and she pulled it off, and she said, I want you to have this as a symbol of reconciliation between the devil that your father was and that old regime and what we were. And you must never forget it. And gave her this little speech, which was very touching.
And this was after the divorce?
And it was at Alf Kamala. Took the photos, and when he actually forbade him to ever show those photos to anybody. The next day it was in the Sunday Times. And then I got a phone call. I couldn't believe it, from the Los Angeles, whatever, that was headlines. And I know that damaged Winnie terribly politically. I spoke to her about a week after that, and I said to her, I've got to bring the ring back. And she said to me, they will not tell me what to do. She said, I did it out of my heart. Winnie is very spiritual. And you tell Candice to keep the ring. That's what happened.
And now the way forward for you?
Well, I'm trying to get out of this, you know. I've never gone to newspapers and sold stories or whatever. I mean, here's a classic example. Did you phone me or did I phone you?
Yes, I must say that George Herald is very upset that he never contacted us. We had to find out after Winnie's death that this Paul Erasmus that we all read about and that we all see on television is actually the Paul Erasmus of the toy run in George.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, we've got him. So.
I'm using my old skills from those years to play the media. And
so why don't you just stop talking to the media? Wouldn't it make your life easier?
I spoke to Tony, the same Tony, last night, and I said to him, this is it, and I'm telling you also, this is it. I'm not getting involved in these things again. You know, I've done my bit. I've spent the last 25 years in so many forums, and I can't change what people want to believe. And with Winnie, certainly, you know, Winnie is the epitomization of white fears in this country. This was the woman that we talked about this the one night, and she said to me, what do white people think? I said, I used to call her ma'am. The first time I called her ma'am, she nearly bit my head off. She said, who's your ma'am? I said to her, ma'am, I said, they kind of think that, some of them think anyway, you're gonna put us in a cooking pot and you guys are gonna have bones through your noses and dance around it, and that's it. There was a lot of guys with spears in the background. And she had this wonderful sense of humor. I mean, she loved stuff like this. She said to me, she'll make me Commissioner of Police the one day. She said, but I'm going to task you with something specific. She said, I want to know how you feel. So I said, what is that? She said, I want you to hang Vlok and Madness and Boerta. And I said, I'll do it with relish. It was purely a joke. I mean, that's it. And then I got to know a bit about her story. You know, Ilse, I can tell you, I got arrested in Turkey, of all places. I was invited on a human rights conference. And boy, the next thing, this was a couple of years ago, this whole human rights thing that was going down under the patronage of Free Muse. I went with a guy that I was tasked to destroy, with Roger Lucy, the musician. Roger and I were both invited, and we ended up in a riot in the middle of Istanbul, and the Turkish cops grabbed us. And I was traumatized. And I said to Roger and them afterwards, I said, I now realize the effect that we had on people those years, because they dragged us off to the secret police headquarters. And I'm telling you, it was John Foster Square during the state of emergency again. The same battered furniture, the overflowing ashtrays, the smell of fear. And I ended up sitting in this jerk's office, like a little schoolboy sitting like this. I couldn't help myself. I've never been so scared in my life. And to make matters worse, this guy was filling in a form which I felt like saying to him, look, I know all about those forms. I've done this for many years. Give me the form and I'll fill it in and save you the trouble. But he was quite well versed, surprisingly. And not the Turks will speak German more than English. This guy's English was impeccable. And halfway through, he was banging away at the typewriter, and I'm sitting there like this. He said to me, Mr. Erasmus, he said, did you ever see the movie Midnight Express? I said, as a matter of fact, I did. I said, excellent show. He said, it's all true. And he carried on. And I'm telling you, I thought, oh my God.
And then they released you.
No, you know what? The door opened and this guy stuck his head around the door and he said, Paul, when that ox finished taking, it was Dave Marks, guy wrote Master Jack. Yeah, it was this guy. And I immediately felt better. There was like a South African said, don't worry, there's lawyers, everything like that, they're going to release us. And I couldn't resist, and I've still got it. I'm very proud of it. After all of this, his ID card was lying on the desk, and there's one thing that I learned in the police force, I can steal. But a sleight of hand. And I leaned over to greet him, my other hand picked it up, and I thought, that's a permanent memento. This bugger must have run around that night in the Savaxi or whatever they called. He couldn't get into the building or out. It's got all the entry codes and that, and it's his ID. It's in my desk drawer.
You were also in a witness protection scheme at one stage.
Yeah, I lived in London and Denmark and Durban and
Who did they
Boksburg.
protect you against?
I don't know. I think Paul de Kock sort of bore the brunt of this.
Who wanted to take you out? Who was threatening you?
I guess many of our colleagues, you know. You know, this whole process started, I was living in Knysna quite peacefully. I've been hospitalized innumerable times for post-traumatic stress here at the Neuroclinic, the Pink Palace. And I decided that's it, a clean break, I'm starting a new life. I was the youngest person that ever left the South African police with 100% medical discharge. I mean, this post-traumatic stress was terrible. And we moved up to Knysna, had a boat up there, just lived, and I walked Dylan down to the little preschool and stopped to buy cigarettes. I used to chain smoke terribly, nervous wreck. And I looked down and there was this photo of Chappie's Kloppers in Die Burger or whatever. And I tell you, it was just that sick feeling, because I knew if he spoke and he would implicate Brood, would implicate, and it already happened. So I bought the newspaper, the kids were at school, and I went up and I said to Dylan's mother, I said, there's big CRAP going down here. So I picked up this newspaper and I read it and I thought, my God, I'm next. And as I saw it then, rightfully so, it was I'm either going to cooperate now and get in while I can and try and save what I can, or I'm going to ride it out. And as it transpired, it took us 2 days. I sat with my wife, my ex-wife, Dylan's mother, and we were devastated. And she said to me, but it can't be. I said, it's now the domino effect. And she actually phoned the Justice Department. And the next day, paradise in Nazen, it was just cars. And that was, I think, on a Thursday. And on the Saturday morning, I woke up, literally came to my senses again. We were in London, under the patronage of that department that they've never acknowledged, although they sort of acknowledged it now, MI5. This fleet of convoy of discoveries. I mean, I'd never been outside South Africa. I'd never been further than Brakpan, you know. Here we are in London with the British Secret Service, or MI5, whatever. And they put a bag over my head, and I sat in the back of the car, and they wouldn't let us know where we were going. It was like these, I remember reading all these books, one turn to the left or whatever, and not thinking how big London actually is. And at a point they let me up for a smoke, and I said, isn't that Windsor Castle? They took us to Bristol, and here's a very interesting story. To a safe house, this farm, magnificent farm. It was just daffodils everywhere. And I wasn't allowed out of the house. The kids, of course, had to be looked after. They took Dylan's mom shopping, and the kids went shopping. And I was effectively debriefed or de-interrogated by the British police. And they hammered on Winnie. It was like more quite about Winnie than anything else. The next question is, what they didn't know that I had was, when I realized my life was under threat with this corruption in Mossa Bay, I started to keep documents. That was a personal pride. So I've got my full record of my total work history in the South African Police Security Branch is intact, and is the only one that I'm aware of in existence anywhere. And this, of course, went to firstly Judge Richard Goldstone, and then to the TRC. So I'm in a pretty unique position. If I say to you, Ilse, that this happened at such and such a time, such and such a date, it's in my casebook. Those are official registers. But there's not that much detail, but you can draw your own conclusions from it. And I'll just mention something which you might find interesting or not, is that Richard Goldstone's report to Nelson Mandela and to de Klerk, he says the following, and I'll quote him verbatim. He says, reading through Erasmus's casebooks is a depressing experience, page after page of documented criminal activity against the people of South Africa. You know, when I read that, I had a lot of exchanges with Richard Goldstone. It made me realize just the futility of everything that I was ever involved in. I mean, Dave Dalling MP then said about me, he said, what a wasted life. My God, if I could turn the clock back. I would have been over that border so fast through Swaziland into some other place. But when his attitude again was, well, we all fought for this country. She even said at one stage when I answered a million questions about Eugene de Kock, and when he would cry very easy, get very emotional, and I told her how battered he was as a human being. And she said, you know, this man is actually a hero simply because of his, she admired courage tremendously. And very conciliatory. She said, he was a victim, just like you're a victim, and like I'm a victim of apartheid. The fact that the young white guys were slammed into the breech of a gun to fight the enemies of the National Party was just unbelievable.
So if you could live your life over, would you have left the country as a young man?
I would have left. But die skande so groot gewees het is now, because, you know, You know, what is he doing now? No, it's a girlfriend do it, you know, this type of stuff. I've never got away from that label, and it's...
What label?
That I was Winnie's lover. I mean, even Bishop Tutu, he said, how can a man be in two places at the same time? I was on a witness protection program being looked after by MI5 in Britain. And Zeliswa Falati, Winnie's aide, registered security branch informer, runs to the TRC and comes out with a story. I mean, it was to discredit me and try and push this distance away. And if anything, she succeeded. And then Richardson followed up. He also came out conveniently, I think a year or two later. I can't remember at one point. He also came out with the thing that he also saw me leaving her bedroom at dead of night, the most monitored place in South Africa. And here's this white man, you know, I don't know. It's just absolutely ridiculous. So I live a quiet life, and I enjoy life. I love my kids and my grandchildren, and we do peaceful things.
And you're going to be staying in the George area?
I like to think I will be staying in the George area. No, I love George. Not always the easiest town because of stories like this. That was the most devastating thing that ever happened to me. Die Burger. We've got the article here, you can see it, the headline. In fact, it was on the street corners. And I remember going to church, you know, and just getting this, all of a sudden I had leprosy. It was just back off. I lost friends. I was very religious those years. My prayer partner didn't speak to me. And I told him to F off inside the church just after communion. I mean, people judged me, but I never knew what I was being judged for. I started a little art school here because that's all that I ever wanted to do in my life. And you know that Dylan and I were nominated for the, we almost won the Nedbank Green Trust Award. We brought out the Nkomfi soap. I think that's probably about the first time that I met you. I think it was at the George Chamber. We did well in business. I mean, from a security cop that was throwing petrol bombs through people's windows, Dylan and I, or me anyway, are developing cosmetics, skin care, and going to conferences and all this stuff. Big change, but there was always this thing about how bad I am. So I was getting a little taste of what we did to Mama Winnie. I don't put my foot in the Methodist Church.
I want to ask you one final. If you could say now, in hindsight, Winnie Madikizela-Mandela has died, if she could now get up from the grave and sit in that chair, what would you say to her today?
I'd welcome her back with big arms. I was very fond of her. You know, I saw a side of Winnie that maybe few people didn't. I mean, she trusted me implicitly. I'm happy to say I never lied to her about anything, and I think she respected that. What would I say to her? God, you can't undo the past, but I think Winnie could have played a bigger role in this country than what she actually did.
Would you have liked her to be president?
I don't know about president. I think Winnie might still have been a bit too radical for that. You need a peacemaker, but I think what happened with Winnie, she tried to accommodate everybody, the radical elements, the pacifists. You know, the door was always open. That might have been very difficult for her if she was at the top of it all. But the image that's painted of her is a hater of white people, and
do you believe that she never had a hand in any killing?
I'm not sure. If somebody ever put the thing down, I would look you in the face and say, well, it's possible.
Paul Erasmus, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.